Get your hands off them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She stepped between the man in the $3,000 suit and two trembling, elderly people sitting on diner stools, and she looked him dead in the eyes and said it again. Get your hands off them. The armed men behind him moved. He raised one hand and they stopped. And then something happened that nobody in that diner, not Chloe Hayes, not the regulars, not even the man himself expected. He dropped to his knees, right there on the cracked tile floor. And in a broken whisper, he said, Papa, you're alive. If this story already has your chest tight, hit subscribe right now and follow every part to the end. Drop a comment with your city you want to see how far the story travels. The rain that night was the kind Chicago threw at you like it was personal. Chloe Hayes had been on her feet since 7 in the morning, and it was now 8:45 at night, and her back had stopped hurting 2 hours ago, which she knew from experience meant it had moved past hurting into something worse. She wiped down the counter for the 4th time and didn't think about the envelope on the kitchen table at home, the one from the landlord, the one she'd been rotating to the bottom of the stack for 3 weeks, because putting it on the bottom bought her one more day of not knowing exactly how bad the number inside it was. Booth 4. Leo, 9 years old. Library book open, grilled cheese half-eaten, completely unbothered by the fact that his mother was holding the world together with both hands and a damp rag. Mom, he said without looking up, can I get hot chocolate? It's almost 9. It's Friday. You're 9. Almost 10. She almost smiled. She kept the almost for herself and moved to refill the coffee at the end of the counter. And that was when the bell above the door rang and Sam and Rose walked in. She knew their walk before she saw their faces. Sam's careful, dignified shuffle, tall, once bent, now brown coat with the missing button he always held shut with his left hand. Rose behind him, smaller silver hair, pinned back, eyes still sharp and warm, even when everything else about her looked tired. They took their usual stools, 3rd and 4th from the left. Always. Terrible night, Sam said, reporting it, not complaining. Terrible, Chloe agreed. She was already reaching for the coffee pot. She knew how they took it, Sam black rose, 2 sugars and cream. She poured without asking and went to the kitchen and came back with 2 bowls of beef stew made from yesterday's roast. Chloe, Rose started. Going in the trash, Chloe said. Eat. Sam's hands trembled around the spoon. More than last week. She noticed and said nothing. Rose had a faint bruise along her arm covered badly with powder. She noticed that too. She said nothing about either one. This was the arrangement. They ate. She worked. Nobody made it bigger than it was. It was ordinary for exactly 11 more minutes. Then the door opened and ordinary ended. She didn't look up immediately. She heard the difference first, not the shuffle of cold, tired people coming in from the rain. The solid, deliberate weight of men who moved through spaces like they already owned them. She raised her eyes, 3 of them. 2 stayed near the door, hands folded in front of them, in the particular way of men who are never far from a weapon. The 3rd walked forward into the light. 34, maybe 35. Dark suit, no tie hair, cut close. He moved with the complete and total ownership of a man who had never once in his adult life walked into a room and wondered if he belonged in it. His eyes swept the diner in 1-second flat booths, regulars, Leo kitchen, door, back exit, and then they landed on Sam. He stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Like something had severed the signal between his brain and his legs. Chloe was already moving. She came around the counter and put herself between this man and the 2 people on the stools before she'd made a conscious decision to do it. It was the same instinct that had made her, at age 32, step between a drunk regular and a teenage girl he'd been leaning over. The instinct that said, not in my place. Hey, flat, steady, can I help you? He didn't look at her. He was staring at Sam with an expression that had no business being on a face like his cracked open raw than a man like him should ever let himself appear. Sir, louder now, I'm going to ask you one more time. His eyes moved to her, dark, nearly black in the low light, and what she saw in them was not the threat she'd expected, not anger, not the cold authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. It was grief, immediate and enormous, the kind that had clearly been stored somewhere for a very long time and had just been hit without warning. Who are these people to you, he asked, quiet, controlled, barely. My customers, she said, and I'd appreciate if you'd speak to me, not past me. The man on his right moved half a step. The man in the suit raised one hand, barely a gesture, almost nothing, and the movement stopped completely. He had that kind of authority, the kind where the smallest motion was absolute. "I'm not here to cause problems," he said. "Then why are you here?" He didn't answer, and then Sam set his spoon down on the edge of the bowl with a small, deliberate click. "Peter," Sam said. The name hit the room like a stone thrown into glass. The man Peter exhaled, one long, shuddering breath, like he'd been holding it for 10 years. "Papa," he said, and his voice didn't just crack. It broke completely. Every controlled, armored, efficient thing about him collapsed into that single word. He crossed the distance to his father in 3 steps and dropped to his knees on the diner floor, and the 2 armed men by the door looked at each other and looked away because they didn't know what to do with what they were seeing, and Chloe didn't know either, and Rose had pressed both hands over her mouth, and Leo had closed his book. "They told me you were dead," Peter said. He was looking at Sam the way you look at a miracle you've stopped believing in. "The fire. They said there was nothing left. I spent 10 years. He stopped. His jaw worked. 10 years, Papa." "We got out," Sam said gently, like he'd been waiting a long time to say it. "You got out," Peter repeated. He said it like a man translating from a foreign language. "You got out, and you've been—" He looked around the diner then, really looked. The worn stools, the patched vinyl, the flickering light above the counter. "You've been here." "We've been safe," Rose said. Her voice was steadier than her hands. "That's what we needed to be. Safe?" Something moved through Peter's expression that was not quite anger. "Mama, look at both of you. Look at—" He stopped on Sam's hands. The trembling. "When did that start? How long has he needed?" "The medication isn't always—" Rose stopped herself. "Isn't always what?" Peter's voice had gone very quiet. "Isn't always affordable." Nobody answered. The silence was its own answer. Chloe felt the private weight of it and didn't look away from it because looking away felt like a betrayal of something. Peter stood. He was controlled again, or working very hard at it. "I need to take you somewhere safe, tonight." "Peter," Sam began. "Papa." He said it with the patience of a man who has made a decision and is implementing it. "People who want to use you to get to me, they exist. They are real. And me being here tonight means someone knows I came to this neighborhood for a non-business reason. They will want to know why. It won't take long." "Hold on." Chloe's voice cut through it clean. Both men looked at her. She didn't adjust her stance. "You walked in here knowing that by walking in here, you put them in danger. And now your solution is to uproot them tonight because you can't undo what you already did. My solution is to protect them. They have a life here," Chloe said. "A small one maybe, a hard one, but it's theirs. They have a pharmacist on Halsted who gives them the sliding scale price. They have a neighbor who checks on them when I can't. They have those stools and this counter and soup that doesn't cost them anything." She stopped. "You don't get to blow all of that up and call it protection." Peter stared at her. Rose made a sound behind her hand that was half laugh and half something else. "Who are you?" Peter asked. Genuinely. "The woman who gave your parents dinner tonight," Chloe said, "and the woman who's asking you to slow down and think." Something moved behind his eyes. "5 minutes," she said. "Sit down. Let them finish their food. Then you talk like people." She pulled a clean mug, filled it, slid it across the counter without being asked. "Whatever you're planning can wait 5 minutes." He looked at the mug. He sat down. Sam picked up his spoon. Rose wrapped her hands around her coffee. Peter sat with both elbows on the counter like a regular man in a diner, and for 60 seconds the world was almost ordinary. "She always puts extra carrots in," Sam said quietly, to no one in particular. "I told her once I liked them." She remembered. Peter looked at his father. "I know we have to go," Sam said before Peter could speak. "I'm not arguing. I'm just asking you to understand what you're taking us from, so you know the weight of it." Peter looked at his hands on the counter. "I understand," he said. Rose reached across and placed her hand over his, within ivory and certain. He looked down at it, and Chloe deliberately found something else to look at. That was when Greg walked in. She knew before she fully saw him. The particular energy of Greg Hannigan entering a room, fleshy, red-faced, the smell of cigarettes and aggressive cologne, the body language of a man who had rehearsed something on the way over and was ready to perform it. "Hayes, He pulled off his wet jacket and dropped it on a stool with the casualness of a man who owned the stool, which he technically did. Past the 15th, third time I'm saying it in person. I know the date, Greg. I've got someone willing to take that apartment starting next month. I need to know if you're in or out tonight. Chloe's jaw went tight. She was aware with the full, precise awareness of someone very good at reading a room that Peter Carter was 3 feet away and listening to every syllable of this conversation. This isn't the time, she said quietly. I make the time, Greg said. He pulled out his phone, started typing. His eyes moved around the diner with the casual survey of a man who thought he was simply doing business and landed on Sam and Rose. He looked at them for just a beat too long, not curiosity, calculation. She saw it and didn't know yet what it meant. 2 weeks, she said, just to end it. Fine, 2 weeks. He nodded, put his jacket back on, walked out. The door swung shut. Chloe let out one careful breath through her nose. How much? Peter said. Don't. How much do you owe him? That is not your... She didn't do it for payment, Sam said, quiet and final. And you know better than to offer it like that, Peter. A silence with texture to it. I apologize, Peter said to Chloe. Clean and direct, no performance. She nodded once, accepted. She turned back to the counter, picked up her rag. That was when her phone buzzed on the shelf behind the register. Unknown number. She almost didn't look. She looked. 4 words. Get out of there. She read it twice. She looked up. Peter was already on his feet. We need to go, he said, quiet and absolute. Right now. Who sent me this? She held up her phone. Someone who knew before I did. He was already signaling his men. There's no time. Peter. Her voice stopped him. My son is in that booth. He looked at Leo. And then he looked at her, and what she saw in his face was not the calculation of a man managing an asset. It was the recognition of a man who understands in his body and not just his brain what's actually at stake. No one touches him, Peter said. No one touches anyone in this building as long as I am breathing. That is not a negotiation. That is a fact. She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Leo, she said, jacket, now. He was on his feet before she finished. She went around the counter, picked up her purse, took her son's hand. Her hands were steady. She was distantly surprised that they were steady. Anything from the back? Peter asked. No. The register, leave it. He nodded, held the door for his parents, for Leo, for her. She stopped in the doorway for 1 second, looked back at the counter, the coffee pot still hot on the burner. Leo's half-eaten grilled cheese in booth 4, the stack of unopened envelopes she'd been rotating for 3 weeks. She stepped out into the rain. The door swung shut behind her, and the life she had been holding together with both hands quietly became something she used to have. What opened in front of her was something else entirely, something larger and darker, and though she couldn't have known it yet, something that would demand more of her than she'd ever given and return more than she'd ever imagined. The SUVs were already running. They ran. The city moved past the SUV windows in streaks of wet light, and Chloe kept her hand on Leo's knee the entire time, not because he needed it, but because she did. 2 vehicles. Peter in the first with Sam Rose and 2 of his men, Chloe and Leo in the second with a driver who hadn't spoken and showed no signs of starting. Leo sat close against her side and watched the city slide past and didn't ask questions, which meant he was processing, which meant he was more rattled than he was showing. Her phone buzzed. Same unknown number. They have eyes on Halstead. Don't go back. She typed, who is this 3 dots? Disappeared. Came back. Someone who owes Sam more than he can ever repay. That's enough for now. She locked the screen. Said nothing. The car turned through a neighborhood that got quieter and more expensive, with each block passed through a gate that opened before they reached it and closed the moment they were through, and stopped in front of a house that communicated money not through flash, but through age and solidity, the kind of place that had been here longer than anything around it and intended to remain. The driver spoke for the first time. We're here. I gathered, Chloe said. Leo looked at the house. Did the math the distance between where they'd been eating grilled cheese 90 minutes ago and where they were standing now. Okay, he said. Just that. She took his hand. Peter was already at the first vehicle, one hand under Rose's elbow, with a gentleness completely at odds with the armed men fanning out around them. Sam stood beside them, and for a moment all three were still, father, mother, son, and Chloe looked away because it wasn't hers to watch. A woman appeared at the front door, 50s, sharp-faced, professionally warm. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Diana. I'll show you to your rooms." "I want to speak with Mr. Carter first," Chloe said. Diana looked at Peter. Peter looked at Chloe. "10 minutes with my parents," he said. "Take 20, Chloe said. Leo goes with Diana. "Mom?" "It's fine, baby." She looked at him steadily. "It's fine." Leo assessed Diana with his two old eyes, decided something, and went. Chloe watched him disappear and turn back. "Where are we talking?" she said. "Inside," Peter said. "Then let's go inside." The study. He closed the door and turned to face her, and she crossed her arms and looked at him straight on, because she'd learned long ago that you never let a room decide who has the authority in it. "All of it," she said, "not the version you give people you're managing." He considered her. Then he sat on the edge of the desk, not behind it, she noticed that, and said, "My family's name is Castiglione, my mother's family. I took a different name at 23 for operational reasons. The Castiglione name has a specific enemy, a family called Calabrese. 4 years they've been looking for leverage against me. Living parents are exactly that leverage. Leverage meaning what specifically? They take them. They send pieces back until I step it away from territory I've spent a decade building. They would do that. Without hesitation." The room was very quiet. "And they know my parents are alive because you walked into my diner," Chloe said. "They know I went to Southside Chicago for a non-business reason. They'll pull camera footage, talk to people. This city is smaller than it looks when you know how to listen to it." He paused. "Your landlord." The cold moved through her before the thought fully formed. "Greg." He was on his phone when he left. "Greg is an opportunist. He doesn't know who to. He doesn't need to know. He needs to say the wrong thing once to the wrong person." Peter looked at her steadily. "I'm not saying he did something deliberate. I'm saying the leak doesn't need to be deliberate to be fatal." She pulled out her phone and held it across to him. "Someone warned me before you said anything about leaving." He read the messages. Something moved across his expression, quick and private. "You know who it is," she said. "I have a strong idea." "Tell me." "Not yet. There are things I need to verify before saying them out loud." He handed the phone back. "Give me until morning." "My son is in your house," she said. Not a threat, a fact, stated plainly so there was no ambiguity about its weight. "I understand exactly what that means," he said, and the way he said it told her that he did. "Fine," she said, "until morning." She found Leo in a room so large it seemed to embarrass him slightly. He was sitting on the edge of an enormous bed with his shoes still on and his library book open across his knees. He looked up. "This bed is unreasonable," he said. "Agreed." "Mom." He set the book down. The directness that always preceded his serious questions. "Is that man in the mob?" She looked at her son. "Where did you learn that word?" "I'm 9, not stupid." She sat beside him, pulled his shoes off one at a time. He let her, which meant he needed the comfort of the ritual, even if he wouldn't say so. "We're safe," she said. "I promise." "I know," he said. "You wouldn't have brought us here otherwise." He lay back on the pillow. Then Mom, "Yeah, you did the right thing with Sam and Rose. You always did the right thing with them." She looked at this boy who was too wise and too tired and too good for the life she'd managed to give him, and felt the specific ache of loving someone so much it's almost painful. "Sleep," she said. She waited until his breathing slowed. Then she went to the chair by the window and sat and did not sleep at all. Past midnight, she heard voices in the hallway. She went to the door and pressed her ear against it. "Confirmed 2 vehicles on Halstead 40 minutes after we left." "How close?" "Close enough to pull the diner's exterior footage. They'll have your face by morning." The building was a pause that lasted exactly long enough to be terrible. They hit it. The apartment above the diner. 3rd floor. "Anyone inside?" No, building was empty. The diner, smoke and structural. 1st floor took secondary damage, but the hit was upstairs, targeted. Peter's voice went flat and cold. "Not a gas line." "No, sir. Get Morales on the Calabrese compound by 6. Wake Ricci. I want everything on who tipped them tonight. Everything." Footsteps. Chloe stepped back from the door. She stood in the center of the room and understood what she had just heard. They had blown up her building. Not the diner, The building. The third shelf where she kept her mother's recipe box. The refrigerator covered in Leo's drawings. The photograph from 1987, her parents young before everything. The only photograph that had survived the move from Cleveland, the only one she had. Gone. She sat down on the chair. She didn't cry. There was nothing in her that felt like crying. It was more like the feeling when the doctor called about her mother, that specific silence when information is simply too large for the body to process in real time. When it just sits there like a stone. She sat with it. Then she stood up. Because sitting wasn't going to fix anything, and she was not a woman who sat when there was something to do, even if the only thing to do was to remain upright. She was still in the chair by the window when dawn came gray and slow, and she was downstairs before 6 and found Peter already at the kitchen table with a phone face down in front of him and an untouched coffee going cold. He looked up when she came in. Neither spoke for a moment. She found a mug, poured her own coffee, sat across from him. "You heard," he said. "Thin walls." He nodded, looked at the table. "I'm sorry about your home. Were you surprised the timeline?" He held the pause one beat too long. "No," he said. "You miscalculated." "Yes, direct, no deflection. I thought we had more time. I was wrong." "You miscalculated with my apartment, Peter." "Yes," he said it the same way, the same flat ownership of it. She looked at him. "Most people in your position would tell me it was necessary, that it was the cost of the bigger picture." "Most people in my position would be right," he said. "That doesn't make it true." She drank her coffee. "Tell me who sent me the text last night," she said. He set his mug down. "Vincent Ricci, he works for me. He also knew my parents before the fire. He's been looking for them for years without telling me." He paused. "He found them 2 days before I did. He was watching over them, quietly." "Why didn't he tell you he'd found them?" Peter's jaw moved once. "Because he wasn't sure what I'd become, whether I was someone they were safe near." The kitchen held that. "Had you," Chloe said, "become that?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I genuinely don't know," he said. That's the honest answer. She thought about Sam at the counter, spoon trembling, eating his stew with the dignity of a man who had chosen smallness over proximity to danger. Thought about Rose's hand on Peter's. "I know what you became. I know. And I'm still here." "Your mother doesn't think you have," Chloe said. Something crossed his face too fast to name. "My mother," he said, "has always given me more credit than I've earned. Or she knows something you don't." His phone lit up. He glanced at it. His expression closed into something professional and fast. "I need to take this." He stepped away. She heard him in rapid low Italian, then English. "Where exactly? How many? No. Do not move until I say." He hung up and came back to the table and stood, and she read his face the way she'd read 1,000 faces across a counter, the micro-expression of a man whose decision is already made and who is deciding only how much of it to say. "They found something," she said. "Yes." "Bad?" "Ricci didn't track my parents through the prescription alone," he said. "Someone gave him the lead, someone who knew exactly which neighborhood, which pharmacy, which diner." He stopped. "Someone who had been watching them for longer than any of us realized." Chloe set her mug down carefully. "Greg," she said, "we don't have confirmation yet." "You think it's Greg?" "I think Greg showing up at that precise moment last night, making that much noise while pulling out his phone, was not coincidence, Omand." He looked at her, and there's a deeper question. If Greg knew who they were, who told Greg, she understood what he was building toward. The leak didn't just run from Greg to Calabrese, it ran somewhere else first. Someone had handed Greg the information, someone closer to the inside. The kitchen went quiet in a way that had weight, because Chloe was standing in the kitchen of a man who was beginning to understand that the betrayal reached further than the Calabrese family. That someone he trusted may have pointed a finger at 2 helpless old people and let them be used as bait. She watched him absorb it, watched his jaw tighten exactly once, and then he had it back. "Go be with Leo," he said quietly, "and don't leave the house today." "I wasn't planning to." He picked up his phone and was already dialing. She left him to it. Behind her, she heard him speak in a voice that carried no emotion at all. The voice of a man who had trained himself to feel nothing when the math was terrible. She'd heard that voice before. Not from men like him, from herself. On the bad nights when the bills were spread on the table and she had to add up what she had and what she owed and find a way to make the numbers survivable. The voice you use when you have no choice but to keep going. She went upstairs. Leo was still asleep, one arm thrown wide, the library book on the floor. She picked it up, stood in the quiet of that too-large room and listened to her son breathe. Down the hall, Sam's low voice and Rose's answer. Live, she thought. All of them. Still alive. She held on to that with both hands because it was the only math that was unambiguously, uncomplicatedly good. By 8 in the morning, the house was running on an energy Chloe could feel but not see. Doors moving faster than necessary, Diana appearing in hallways, and vanishing, Peter's voice low and rapid somewhere behind closed doors. The machinery of consequence doing what it does. Leo woke up hungry and unbothered, which she chose to be grateful for. She found the kitchen stocked by invisible hands, bread, eggs, fruit, coffee, and made him 2 pieces of toast and watched him eat with the appetite of someone who has processed what happened and filed it and moved on, because 9-year-olds are built for resilience in a way that sometimes broke her heart with its beauty. Rose appeared in the doorway and Leo saw her and said without preamble, "You always ordered decaf, but my mom gave you regular because you look tired." Rose blinked, then laughed, startled clean out of her. "She's sneaky," Leo said seriously. "The best kind," Rose said, looking at Chloe. Chloe set Rose's coffee in front of her 2 sugars cream, same as always, without being asked. Rose touched the back of Chloe's hand for just a second when she took the mug, and that small touch held 6 months of Thursday nights in it. Then Sam came in, and he moved better, steadier. Someone on Peter's instructions had gotten him his medication. Chloe looked at his hands and felt the tightness in her chest loosen by 1 degree. Leo, with the social intelligence of a child who has grown up around adults in difficult situations, looked at the room, picked up his toast and said, "I'm gonna go read," and removed himself with a tact that made Chloe quietly proud. She was about to say something to Sam and Rose, something about getting through this, something practical and forward-looking, when Peter walked in, and the temperature shifted the way it always did when he entered a space. Not threat, gravity, the specific gravity of a man carrying the full weight of what's happening and not putting any of it down. He looked at his parents, then at Chloe. "Greg Hannigan," he said. "How long did you know him?" 3 years. He owns the building. Problems with repairs, late fees, nothing that read as criminal. "Did he approach you about the apartment, or did you find it?" She thought back carefully. "Sign in the window. I called the number. Standard." "Who referred you to that street?" "Nobody. I was looking for that price range, that neighborhood. I found it on my own." Peter nodded once slowly, like she'd confirmed something. "What?" she said. "The building has been in Hannigan's name for 8 years, he said. But the LLC that owns his management company has a parent entity in Delaware. Silent partner." He paused. "Anthony Calabrese." The kitchen went absolutely still. Rose set her mug down. Sam said quietly and completely, "No." "The building was a net," Peter said. "Someone identified the area where my parents were living. Hannigan was positioned there to watch, to report." He looked at his parents. "We don't know if they have known your location from the beginning or if they pieced it together recently. But the building was not coincidence. It was infrastructure." "They knew where we were," Rose said, very quiet, "all this time." "Possibly, or they suspected and used the building to monitor. Either way, Sam said, and his voice had changed harder, older. The voice of a man who once moved in these circles and never entirely lost the feel of them. "They let us live because we were more useful alive, as bait." "Yes," Peter said. "Until you found us," Sam said. "Until we became leverage instead." "Yes." Chloe's mind was already moving. "When Greg came in last night at the performance of it, the loudness, he wanted you to see him. He wanted you to know he had a line to me and through me to them." "Yes." "He wasn't collecting rent," she said. "He was establishing presence, sending a signal." "Yes." "In front of me." The cold and bright feeling again moving through her chest. "He wanted me scared and cornered, so I'd be easier to use later." Peter looked at her with an expression that she was beginning to recognize, the one where he was measuring someone and finding the results surprising. "You see it fast," he said. "I've been reading rooms for 7 years," she said. "What happens now?" "I handle it." "How specifically?" "In the way." "No." Her voice was level and exact. "It was. Not in the way you handle things. I need a real answer. Because there are two elderly people at this table, my son is in the next room, and I have been awake for 30 hours. Give me a real answer. He looked at her for a long moment. The Calabrese documentation goes federal, he said. I have a contact. I've maintained it for years, not out of cooperation, out of insurance. I've never given them anything significant. He paused. Toland's information, if it gives me, Calabrese, fully, that's significant. That changes the dynamic entirely. Toland, she said, the name you mentioned this morning. My logistics director, 6 years. He knows every supply line, every agreement, He stopped on it. He was the only person in my organization who had access to the prescription lead that brought me to the diner. He sent you there, Chloe said. Slowly, building it out loud. Knowing Calabrese was watching. Knowing the moment you walked in and found your parents, Calabrese would move. He didn't find them for me, Peter said. He arranged for me to find them, then handed my real-time location to Calabrese. Why Besseman? Because if Calabrese pressures me into surrendering the port agreements, Toland steps into the vacuum. He's been constructing a parallel structure for 2 years. I didn't see it because I trusted him. He stopped on the word. 6 years I trusted him. Sam said, Peter, I know, Papa. The anger, I know. A breath. I know. Their eyes held for a moment. Something passing between them, old and wordless. The shorthand of a relationship that had been interrupted for 10 years but not erased. Then Peter's phone rang. He answered, listened, said how many, and then don't let him leave. Hung up. Looked at Chloe. Greg Hannigan is at a bar 3 blocks from the diner. He's waiting for a call telling him the next step. Once he gets that call, he runs and we lose him. Go, Chloe said. I need you to stay. I know. Go. She held his gaze. And Peter, a dead man can't tell you who gave the original order. Whatever you're planning to do with him, remember that. He paused. I know how to do this, he said. I know you do. I'm saying it out loud so we're both clear on what comes back from it. The pause stretched 1 beat. Then he nodded. Ricci stays, she said. Yes. He was already moving. The back door closed. The engine in the drive started and faded. Chloe sat back down at the table. Leo appeared in the doorway immediately. He'd been just outside it, she suspected, for the last 10 minutes. Is it okay? He said. Come here, she said. He came and stood beside her. She put her arm around him, and he leaned in, which told her what she needed to know. He went to fix something, Leo said. Yes. Is he actually going to fix it? He asked it to Sam, not to her. Sam looked at the boy for a moment with the seriousness the question deserved. He's a man who finishes what he starts, Sam said. Always was. The question is only what he decides to start. Leo absorbed this, nodded, reached for an apple, and bit into it with decisive appetite because 9-year-olds move through emotion faster than anyone. Ricci's phone buzzed. He checked it and looked at Chloe. Carter has Toland, he said, that fast. Toland didn't see it coming. He met her eyes. He's alive. Carter needs him talking. She nodded, filed away what that choice said about who Peter actually was underneath everything. 20 minutes. The longest 20 minutes. Sam had fallen gently asleep in his chair. Rose sat beside him with her hand on his arm and talked with Leo about Naples, the smell of the sea, what her mother cooked on Sundays, and Chloe sat and let the warmth of it move over her like something she hadn't known she needed. She was so tired. She had no home, no counter, no stack of bills to manage. Everything she'd held together for 7 years with both hands had been scattered overnight by choices that weren't hers. And yet, she looked at Sam's sleeping face and Rose's steady hand and Leo's focused attention and felt beneath the exhaustion and the loss the strange and specific gratitude of someone who has found something real in the space where the known shape of her life used to be. The door opened. Peter came back. He looked at the room, his parents, Leo, Ricci, Chloe, and something in his posture shifted by a degree that only someone paying close attention would catch. She caught it. He sat. Toland has agreed to provide full documentation, he said quietly so as not to wake Sam. His arrangement with Calabrese, 3 years of correspondence, financial transfers, and he paused. A recorded phone call 4 days ago. Toland told Calabrese I was about to locate my parents. He gave them the window to prepare. 4 days ago, Chloe said, before you even walked in. Yes. He engineered the whole thing. The reunion, the exposure, your reaction? Yes. Flat and absolute. How long was he with you? 6 years. She didn't try to address that directly. Some things don't benefit from being addressed. She just let it sit there because it deserved to sit there. What does the documentation do? She said. Practically. It goes federal. My contact. In exchange, my parents become a matter of federal record. Any move against them by Calabrese triggers federal response. They become untouchable. He paused. Not just from Calabrese, from anyone. And you, Rose said. She'd been awake. Maybe she always had been. What happens to you? Oh, I have protections, sufficient ones. He looked at his mother. I'm not going to prison. That's part of what I'm asking, she said. The other part is whether this stops. Not Calabrese, not Tolan. She folded her hands on the table. Whether you stop. The kitchen held its breath. Peter was quiet for a long time. I don't know how to answer that honestly yet, he said. That's better than the lie would have been, Rose said simply. Sam, without opening his eyes, said, it's a start. Leo, sitting between them with his apple core, looked at Peter Carter with the uncomplicated directness of a child who has no investment in protecting anyone's feelings. I think you should stay, he said. Not just here. I mean, he thought about it. You look like someone who needs somewhere to belong. We're sort of in the same situation. Nobody spoke. Chloe watched the most feared crime boss on the south side of Chicago look at her 9-year-old son and have absolutely nothing to say. Which was, she thought, the most honest thing he'd done since he walked through the diner door. And it was, she realized, though she wouldn't have said it out loud yet, not for anything the moment something shifted. Not fixed, not resolved, shifted. The way a door shifts when someone finally decides to stop holding it closed. It wasn't the end of anything. It was the first thing that felt like a beginning. Nobody filled the silence Leo had created. They didn't need to. Some things land, and the right response is to let them land. Peter looked at the table. Then he cleared his throat, a small human sound, and said, I appreciate that, to Leo quietly, like a man handling something fragile. Leo nodded, bit his apple, done. Chloe stood up. I'm going to make more coffee. Because she needed to do something with her hands, and because the room needed a normal sound in it. She was at the counter when Peter's phone lit up. He answered, listened for 8 seconds, and said, send it all directly to me. Nothing goes through the usual channels. Nothing. He hung up and stood. The documentation from Greg's office is on its way. Everything Ricci's men recovered. How long until your federal contact moves? Chloe asked. Depends on what the documents show. If it's as comprehensive as Ricci believes, hours, not days. And until then, we wait. And until then, we stay exactly here. She accepted that, poured his coffee without thinking about it, slid it across to him. He looked at the mug. You do that automatically, he said, of habit. Even now. Especially now, she said. I get more useful when things are bad, not less. It's a design flaw. Something in his expression softened, not much, just at the edges. It's not a flaw, he said. She turned back to the counter. The medication for your father runs on a strict schedule, twice daily with food. Diana doesn't know that yet, I do. I've been managing it informally for 3 months because the pharmacy had supply issues and Sam wouldn't tell anyone he was skipping doses because he didn't want to worry Rose. She paused. So whoever handles the medical side of things here needs that information directly. Peter was already reaching for his phone. Diana, he said when she answered, I need you in the kitchen. Diana appeared in 40 seconds. Chloe told her everything she knew about Sam's medications, scheduled dosage, what to watch for, what the missed dose effects looked like. Diana listened without writing any of it down, and Chloe trusted she had it because Diana was clearly a woman who forgot nothing. When Diana left, Rosa was watching Chloe with an expression that was more than gratitude. It was recognition. The look of one woman seeing another clearly. He never told us he was skipping doses, Rose said softly. I know, Chloe said. He was protecting you. He always does that. She looked at her husband's sleeping face. We protect each other from the hard things and end up both carrying them anyway. That's marriage, Chloe said. Yes, Rose said, that's marriage. Peter looked between them. Something moved through his expression, the look of a man observing a world he had kept himself outside of for a very long time, and was only now recognizing the shape of what he'd missed. The documents arrived at 11:43. Peter took them in the study, and Chloe gave him an hour. She knew when she should be in a room and when she shouldn't be, and a man reading evidence of a 6-year betrayal was a room she shouldn't be in. She sat with Leo. He was reading a new book, something from the study shelf, thick and serious looking. He held it up so she could see the cover. Something about the history of organized crime in America. She stared at it. Where did you get that? The shelf in the study? That is not appropriate reading material for you, but I've read 4 chapters, he said. It's mostly economic theory. She was still deciding how to respond to this when Peter appeared in the doorway of the sitting room and said, Chloe, I need you. She went. In the study, the documents were spread across the desk, photographs of handwritten notes, printouts of digital records, what appeared to be bank statements. Peter was standing behind the desk, and his face had the precise, contained quality she now recognized as his version of barely holding it together. Tolan didn't build this in 2 years, he said. His voice was flat and controlled. He started the day he came to work for me. 6 years, the parallel structure, the communication with Calabrese, the positioning. He stopped. He came to me already working for them. He was placed, Chloe said. Yes. As a long game. Yes. He picked up one of the photographs, set it back down. There's a ledger. Every significant decision I made in the last 6 years that he had access to, he flagged it. Every meeting, every agreement, every move. He looked up. My entire operation has been transparent to Calabrese for 6 years. Everything I built, they watched me build it. The scale of it settled over the room. And they waited, Chloe said, until they had the right pressure point. My parents, Peter said, they waited until I found my parents because they knew that was the one thing that would make me. He stopped. Make you what? He looked at her. Human, he said. Make me human enough to be predictable. The word landed hard. She watched him feel the truth of it, that the very thing that had cracked him open when he walked through the diner door, the thing that had made him look like a son instead of a crime boss, was exactly what had been weaponized against him. His love for his parents was the vulnerability they'd been waiting to exploit. You couldn't have known, she said. I should have. No, she said firmly. You were doing the normal human thing of believing that the people who work beside you every day are not actively destroying you. That's not a failure of intelligence. She stopped. That's just being a person. He looked at her for a long moment. You're very good at that, he said. At what? At saying the thing that reframes without dismissing. He paused. Most people either tell you it's fine or they pile on. You do neither. I've had a lot of practice, she said. Single motherhood is mostly reframing without dismissing. She said it lightly. He didn't take it lightly. He heard it exactly the way she'd meant it as a window briefly opened. Then his phone rang. He answered. His expression changed immediately, not alarm. Relief. Controlled professional relief. Yes, he said. Yes, I've reviewed them. They're sufficient. He moved toward the window. I understand the timeline. I'll have the originals to your office by 6, he listened. Agreed, thank you. He hung up and turned. It moves tonight, he said, the federal arrest. They pulled Tolan's documentation against their existing case file, and it completed the picture they've been building on Calabrese for 2 years. He paused. They move at 6 a.m. tomorrow. The tightness in Chloe's chest loosened by a degree she felt physically. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow. And until then, this house. She nodded, turned to go, stopped. Peter. Yeah. Your mother asked me something this morning, she said. While you were out, she asked if I thought you were going to be okay. Not about Calabrese, about after. He was very still. What did you tell her, he said. I told her I thought you were making better choices than you had been, Chloe said. Which is true, and it's also not enough. And I think she knows that, and I think you know that. He looked at his hands. I know, he said. What do you want, she asked. Not what you're protecting, not what you're managing. What do you actually want? The questions sat there between them. He didn't answer immediately. She waited because she'd learned that the real answer to a question like that needs space to form. I want to eat dinner at a table, he said finally, with people who are there because they want to be, Not because they're employed or afraid or indebted. He paused. I want to be someone that my father can look at without grieving what I became. Another pause. I want... He stopped. She waited. He looked at her. I want things that I don't have the right vocabulary for yet, he said, because I haven't wanted them in a very long time and I've forgotten the words. She held his gaze. Start with dinner, she said. She went back to the kitchen and started cooking. She didn't have everything she needed. Diana produced what she asked for with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood that this was important without knowing exactly why. Chloe cooked the way she cooked when things were hard, with full attention, with care, with the particular focus that kept her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. Leo came in and sat at the counter and watched her work, which was what he'd done since he was old enough to sit on a stool without falling off. Rose came in and sat beside him. Sam woke from his doze and shuffled in and took his place. Ricci appeared in the doorway, assessed the situation, and sat down without being asked. Peter came last. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the table. His parents, Leo, Ricci, Chloe behind the counter. Then he sat down. She served dinner. They ate at the table. All of them. No phones. Peter put his face down after the second time it rang and didn't pick it up again. Sam told a story from the old neighborhood that made Rose laugh and made Peter smile with his whole face unguarded, the way he must have smiled before he decided smiling was a liability. Leo asked Sam 14 questions in rapid succession about what Chicago was like in the 70s, and Sam answered everyone with the patience of a man who had been waiting for someone to ask. Chloe ate and listened and felt the table around her, the noise of it, the life of it, and thought this. This is what a table is for. Later, clearing dishes, Peter came to stand beside her at the counter. Not in her way, just near. Thank you, he said, for dinner. He looked for the word, for making it feel like something worth protecting. She kept her hands moving. It was always worth protecting, she said. You just needed to see it. He was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do, he said. After, the diner, everything. Rebuild, she said, same as I always do. I want to help. I know. Is that a yes? She looked at him. It's a not yet, she said. Let the dust settle first. Then we'll talk about what help looks like and what it comes from. He nodded, accepted it, didn't push, which told her more about who he was choosing to be than anything else he could have said. At 10 that night, her phone rang. Unknown number, different from before. Something cold moved through her before she answered. The voice was male, calm in the performed way. The calm of a man who maintains it with great effort. Ms. Hayes, my name is Anthony Calabrese. She went absolutely still. She looked at Peter across the room. He saw her face and was moving toward her before she raised her hand, one gesture minimal. Absolute. She'd learned it from watching him. He stopped. I know who you are, she said into the phone. Then I'll be direct, Calabrese said. You're in Carter's house. You're there with his parents, and I want you to understand the offer I'm making. A pause. Carter steps back from the port agreements. Everything you love walks away safe. I give you my word. Your word, she said. Yes. The same word you gave when you burned down the building where my son lives. A silence. That was a message, he said. This is a promise. Chloe looked at Sam. Hold on, she said. She lowered the phone, looked at Sam. He's offering a trade, port agreements for everyone's safety. Don't, Sam said immediately. He doesn't give things back once he takes them. Without the agreements, Peter has no leverage to protect anyone. We become useless. His eyes were very steady. Useless to Calabrese means dead. She raised the phone. Mr. Calabrese, she said, I'll pass on your offer, but I want you to understand something. Yes. You blew up the home where my son has lived for 3 years. You used 2 elderly people as bait for a decade. You put a man inside Peter Carter's organization to hollow it out from the inside. She kept her voice level and precise. So your word means exactly nothing to me, and I don't think it means anything to the people you're trying to reach either. She paused, but I'll pass it along, out of courtesy. A long silence. The offer has a window, Calabrese said. Tonight. The call ended. Peter was looking at her. She lowered the phone. He has my personal cell number, she said, a number I've given to almost nobody. Peter's expression didn't change. But behind his eyes, something went very still and very cold. The cold of a man who has just confirmed the last piece of something he hadn't wanted to be true. Tolan, he said quietly. He had access to my contacts. He had access to everything. 6 years, Chloe said. 6 years, he said. He picked up his phone and walked out of the room, and she heard him on a call in the hallway, fast and clipped, and final in the way of a man closing a door that isn't going to open again. And she stood in the kitchen with Sam and Rose and Leo and Richie and felt the night outside the house pressing in from all directions. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow it moves. Leo looked at her from across the table. It's almost over, isn't it? He said. Not a question. Almost, she said. Good, he said, and picked up his book. She was awake at 5:47 when her phone rang, and Agent Sandra Pruitt told her that Anthony Calabrese had been taken into federal custody 43 minutes ago at his Oak Park residence, that the operation was clean, that there were no injuries, and that it was now safe for Chloe Hayes and her son to move freely. Chloe sat on the edge of the bed and held the phone and listened. The documentation was more comprehensive than anticipated, Pruitt said with a measured dryness that suggested complicated feelings about that. When the window appeared, we moved. Peter is not in custody. He's been informed. A pause. Ms. Hayes, what you did protecting two people with no one else, not knowing what it would cost you, that mattered in ways that extend beyond this case. I wanted you to know that. Thank you, Chloe said. The call ended. She sat with the absence of what she'd been bracing against for 4 days. The weight she'd been holding herself rigid against was simply gone, and the body doesn't immediately know what to do with that kind of release. She sat still for 1 full minute and let herself feel it. Then she stood up because she was Chloe Hayes, and she did not sit when there was something to do. Peter was already in the kitchen. Standing, not sitting, she'd learned that he stood when the energy in him had nowhere to go. He looked up when she came in. She called you, he said. Yes, Chloe went to the coffee pot. It's done. The Calabrese part, he said. Yes, she poured. The Calabrese part. He was watching her with that full, undefended attention she'd gotten used to, without noticing the way he paid attention to her, specifically as if she was the most interesting room he'd been in years. What happens now, he said. For me, she turned. I find out what's left of the diner. I find an apartment. I start the insurance process, which is going to be its own kind of war. She paused. The normal aftermath of having your life exploded. I want to help with the diner, he said. I know you do. Is that a no? She looked at him carefully. I will accept contractors and structural assessment because I'm practical and I have a 9-year-old and my pride has a ceiling I know exactly where to find. She held his gaze. I will not accept anything that comes from guilt or obligation. It creates a dynamic I've been in before, and I won't go back to it. I'm not offering from guilt, he said. Then what are you offering from? He held her gaze. Then he said quietly and without performance, from wanting you to succeed, specifically you. He paused. Because you are the most capable and most stubborn person I've met in 20 years of meeting people, and I want to see what you build when you're not building against something. She looked at him for a long moment. That, she said, I can work with. He nodded. One corner of his mouth moved. Name, he asked. Mine to choose. Of course. I'm not naming it after anyone. A pause that had texture. I wasn't suggesting that. Good. She picked up her coffee. I have an idea, actually. She didn't tell him then. She told Rose first 3 days later in the small apartment she and Leo had moved into. Modest and clean, and 3 blocks from Leo's school. Nothing like the Castiglione house, and exactly what she needed. Rose was sitting at Chloe's new kitchen table with her hands around a coffee mug, and Chloe said, I want to call it Rosie's Hearth. And Rose went so quiet for so long that Chloe started to worry. Then Rose said, Nobody has ever named anything after me before, in a voice so small it didn't sound like her. I know, Chloe said. That needed to be fixed. Rose pressed both hands flat on the table and looked at them. Sam is going to cry. Sam can cry. He'll say he's not going to, Rose said, and then he'll cry. She was completely right. The rebuilding took 8 weeks. 8 weeks of permits and contractors and equipment decisions and 100 small choices made one at a time, each one a deliberate act of reconstruction, that was also, on some level, an act of refusal against the Calabrese family, against Greg Hannigan, against every force that had tried to take from her, against every version of the story where she ended up with less. She did not end up with less. Peter called 3 times during those 8 weeks, twice about practical things, a contractor question, and insurance contact. Once for no stated reason, which became 40 minutes of conversation that started with the diner and moved through Chicago winters and Leo's reading habits, and what Peter's mother had been like in her 30s, and which ended only because Chloe looked at the clock and realized she'd been sitting on her kitchen floor for 40 minutes, and her coffee had gone completely cold. She called him once to tell him the structural inspection had come back clean on the first floor. He said he'd heard. She said of course he'd heard. He had people everywhere. He said, that's not why I know. She said, then why do you know? He said, because I've been paying attention. She didn't know what to do with that, so she said, thank you. And they both held the line for a beat too long before hanging up. She was not counting. She was definitely not counting. The morning the news sign went up, she stood on the sidewalk in front of what was now Rosie's hearth and felt something in her chest settle into a position it hadn't occupied in a very long time. Leo was beside her. It's better than the neon, he said. I always hated that neon. I know, you said so about 400 times. I said it twice. You said it a lot, he said. I have a very good memory. He looked at the sign. Can I do homework at the counter? Absolutely not. I'm going to do homework at the counter. I know, she said. I've accepted it. He grinned. She put her arm around him and felt him lean into it, solid and warm. In hers. Sam and Rose were there. Rose in her good coat. Sam steadier than she'd seen him in months. The medication running on schedule, the tremor down to something manageable. His eyes clear and present. Ricci stood slightly to the side with his hands in his pockets saying nothing. He'd been doing that a lot lately, showing up standing near, not needing anything from it. She'd come to find it unexpectedly reassuring. Peter was there. He stood beside her and looked at the sign and didn't say anything for a moment. Then, it's good. It is. Better than the neon. She looked at him. You know about the neon? You mentioned it, he said. The night in the kitchen. You were listing what you wouldn't miss. You said the neon was ugly and flickered in cold weather. He paused. I remembered. She had completely forgotten saying it. He had not forgotten. She looked back at the sign, at the letters that were hers, the name that was Rose's, the place that was rebuilt from what had been broken. Come inside, she said, and I'll make coffee. He followed her in. The diner smelled like fresh paint and new wood and clean space, the smell of beginning. The counter was refinished. The stools were new. The booths were recovered in a dark green she'd chosen because it reminded her of nothing she'd had before and everything she wanted to build. She went behind the counter. There. The rightness of bed, the counter between her hands and the rest of the world, the position that had always been hers, the place where she had always been most completely herself. She made coffee. She set a mug in front of Peter. He looked at it. You always do that, he said. Force of habit, she said. The same words as the first time. The same answer, and both of them knew it. He looked up at her. I've been trying to find the right language, he said, for what I want to say. She waited. I ruled out guilt, he said. An obligation. In every transactional frame that comes naturally to a man who has spent 20 years transacting. He wrapped his hands around the mug. What's left is simpler than any of those, and harder to say. She kept her eyes on his. Then say it, she said. I want to be someone worth knowing, he said. I want it for my parents, and I want it for that kid of yours who said, you look like someone who needs somewhere to belong, and I want it, he stopped, started again. I want it specifically for you, because you looked at me in a diner 4 weeks ago with nothing to protect yourself with except yourself, and you didn't flinch. And I have been around a great many people who didn't flinch for a great many bad reasons. He held her gaze. Yours was different. The diner was quiet. The new wood held the silence. Outside Chicago kept moving enormous and indifferent and full of the grinding daily machinery of people living their lives. She thought about the bowl of soup, about 2 bar stools on a Thursday evening, about a choice she'd made without deciding simply because she couldn't do the other thing, simply because turning away had never been in her vocabulary. She thought about $30 in a car seat and a road going east, and the stubborn, specific knowledge She'd carried the whole while away that she was not going to stop. She thought about Leo saying it's a start. She set her hands on the counter. That's a good reason, she said. Is it enough, he said. She held his gaze for one long moment. Ask me again in 6 months, she said. Come in every Thursday, sit at that stool, drink your coffee, and in 6 months you ask me again. He looked at the stool. Every Thursday, he said. Every Thursday, she said. He sat down. Sam came through the door, holding it for Rose, who came in unwinding her scarf the same way she'd unwound it 100 Thursday evenings ago, and sat in her seat, fourth stool from the left, the one that had always been hers, and wrapped her hands around the mug Chloe set in front of her without being asked. We're open, Rose said. Not until Monday, Chloe said. But you don't count. Why not? Because you never did. She set the coffee down. 2 sugars, cream, perfect. You've always just been here. Rose's hands tightened around the mug. She looked up at Chloe with those warm, clear, seeing eyes. Good, she said softly. That's exactly how it should be. Leo came in last library book under his arm and took his stool at the end of the counter and said, I'm doing homework here with the calm of someone stating an established fact. No, Chloe said. Yes, Leo said. Peter looked at Leo. Leo looked at Peter. Some communication passed between them, brief and male, and mutually amused, and Chloe pointed at both of them. Don't, she said. I didn't say anything, Peter said. I didn't either, Leo said. You were about to, she said. Peter looked at his coffee to hide whatever his face was doing. Leo opened his book with the precise composure of a child who knows he's won without needing to confirm it. Chloe stood behind her counter in her diner on a November morning, and the coffee was hot and the wood smelled like beginning. And her son was doing homework he wasn't supposed to be doing, and 2 elderly people who had become as necessary to her as breathing were sitting in their seats, and a man she'd known for 4 weeks and somehow knew very well was sitting on the last stool, the one that had always been empty, drinking coffee she'd made him. She had started with a rule, a simple one. Nobody leaves hungry. She had meant it about food. It turned out she had meant it about everything else too, about loneliness, about grief, about the particular hunger of people who have been without kindness for so long that they've forgotten they deserve it. She had fed 2 old people soup on a rainy Thursday, not because it was heroic or strategic, or because she knew what it would set in motion. She'd done it because turning away from someone who needed something you had to give that had simply never been something she was capable of. And that incapability, that stubborn and inconvenient refusal to look the other way, had cost her everything she had, and returned more than she'd known to ask for. Some people are broken by the storms that find them, and some people, the ones who are built a certain way from a certain specific material that looks ordinary until it's tested. Some people stand in the middle of the worst thing and come out the other side, not smaller but larger. Not emptied, but more completely themselves than they were before. Chloe Hayes was built from that material. She had known it her whole life. Now everyone who mattered knew it too. And in the warm coffee-scented quiet of Rosie's hearth on a Thursday morning, with the city moving outside and the people she loved most in the world on the other side of her counter, Chloe picked up her rag and wiped down the surface clean, smooth, ready, and thought, yes, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be.